Welcome to Vital 100, the podcast designed to take your health to the next level.
Welcome back to Vital 100 podcast. I am Dr. Bob Johnson, your host and co-creator of this podcast. Today we are going to discuss a critical topic at the very foundation of illness: how to prevent it, how to understand illness, and how to resolve it. We started last podcast discussing the 8 underlying causes. Now we're going to go into them in detail because this is such a critical topic. Once you remove the underlying causes and you give the body the tools to heal, almost any illness or disease can heal if it is not at a very end stage. So let's go over each of these underlying causes, as they are important to not only discover what is causing a person's disease or illness, but how to eliminate it. The first is that of infections. People are exposed to the flu, they are exposed to so many different infections, and they are as follows. They're the parasites, they're the bacteria, viruses, they're yeast, fungus, and so most infections are countered and eliminated by our immune system. But if our immune system gets weak and the infection is much stronger than the immune system, diseases can begin. They can range anywhere from infections in the lungs to the liver to the brain to any other organ, depending on the weakness or where it was exposed. So infections are very important to find out what they are, and the treatment of different infections is different. So bacteria are treated different than viruses, than parasites, and so forth. One of the ways to resolve infections is to improve the immune system. And about 75% of the immune system is around the gastrointestinal or gut. And so by improving the gut health, and what we'll talk about in a little bit, the microbiome, which is the probiotic population, you can improve dramatically the infections and our immune system's ability to fight those infections. So that is critical to find out where those are. Also, traditional healthcare gives antibiotics for almost any infection, which can create many problems. It's nice to have antibiotics, but they are given far too often and create problems with the microbiome in the gut because it kills them. So fighting infections is very, very important, and it's important to improve and to strengthen the immune system and the microbiome in fighting infections. The next underlying cause is that of toxins. We are exposed to a huge number of toxins in our environment. We have to both eliminate toxins and to minimize the toxins we are exposed to. In our site, Vital 100 Wellness, we're going to have a list of the major toxins you're exposed to, but really they are almost everywhere. In the foods we eat, in the things we put on our skin, to the exposure within the house, in the car, in our place of work, in digging in the garden, we're exposed to a huge number of toxins. And not only is it important to minimize that toxicity and to ultimately remove the toxins from the body, but it's important to strengthen the ability of the eliminative organs, such as the liver, the kidneys, the skin, and what we breathe out. It's important to strengthen each of those organs or systems to be able to remove toxins on a regular basis. One other thing that's important here is the lymphatic system, which does pick up toxins and takes them to the liver, and from there we can remove them. In eliminating toxins, the whole ability to detoxify is very, very important and is a number of steps which we'll talk about in later podcasts. One thing that's really critical in the genetic component is that many people have genetic compromises that do not allow them to detoxify very well. And so these are people, when you do a genetic evaluation, if they have the mutations or the whole gene makeup that they don't detoxify, it's important to give them the nutrients and the tools to help them detoxify, even though their genetic makeup doesn't allow for that. The third underlying cause is nutrient deficiencies or imbalances. When we eat food, we digest it, we chew it and swallow it, and it's digested in the stomach and the intestines and absorbed as the basic nutrient makeup. Those nutrients should be absorbed and transported to the rest of the body to where they're needed. Now, our food supply does not give us the complete nutrient makeup, and also the other compromise to nutrients or imbalances is, one, what we eat, and also the inability to digest and to absorb the complete set of nutrients. So it's important to understand that not only is digestion critical in nutrient balances, but also what we're eating and what we're transporting to the rest of the body. And again, this is another topic we'll go over in much more detail. The fourth underlying cause is that of hormone imbalances. Hormones include, they're actually messengers in the body, but they include everything from the stress hormone, which is cortisol. It is the estrogen, progesterone, the testosterone, the thyroid hormone, all the other messengers that the body needs to be able to communicate from one part of the body to another. And so our hormone imbalances are very important to correct. One example of that is if we're under a huge amount of stress, the body takes the precursor molecule, which is pregnenolone, and makes a lot of cortisol to deal with the stress. But then what happens is all the other hormones are compromised because all that pregnenolone is going to make cortisol. They call this the cortisol steal. But the bottom line is that hormone imbalances are critical to balance out for overall health. And different parts of our life, during pregnancy, during menopause, during andropause, this is when hormones need to be closely followed to be able to balance out, and so overall health can be preserved. The fifth underlying cause is that of structural imbalances. For example, if you have a scoliosis or you have a collapsing foot arch, this can create structural imbalances which can cause pain, which can cause dysfunction of various tissues in the body. And so it's important to figure out how to balance out the structural component of the body to eliminate these as a source of disease. Chiropractors do this. Osteopaths deal a lot with structure. In my functioning with clients, I also deal with structure as it relates to the bite of the jaw, which will affect the rest of the body. The sixth underlying cause is that of unresolved psycho-emotional issues. We all have baggage that we take on during our life. For example, if we've been told we're no good growing up, or we have an inferiority complex, or present day if we're dealing with a huge amount of stress, or we've been abused in some manner, these are all psycho-emotional issues that, if left unresolved, will affect every part of your function throughout your body. And so it's important to not only determine what the underlying cause is, and we have various ways to eliminate unresolved psycho-emotional issues, but to see if during your life you can deal with stress, you can identify them and go through certain therapies that can eliminate these unresolved psycho-emotional issues. One of the traditional ways to deal with this is many years and many appointments of talk therapy. We realize that there's much more effective ways to resolve these things and identify what underlying causes are, because the underlying psycho-emotional issues can affect the heart, can affect the brain, can affect the liver, can affect so many things that cause health issues. So it's important to understand what the issues are, what the psycho-emotional issues are, and to be able to resolve them, which we do on a regular basis. The seventh underlying cause is that of electrical disturbances. We are exposed to a huge number of electrical issues which affect our own body. Many of these are called electromagnetic frequencies, given off by cell phone towers, given off by cell phones. But we know for sure now that these electrical disturbances affect our own electrical flow in the body, because not only are we physical beings, but we're also electrical beings that this electricity needs to flow. And if it's interrupted by electromagnetic frequencies or other electrical disturbances, in fact, it can cause a lot of health problems. We know that brain development in younger people is profoundly affected if they're on the cell phone. We know that many cancers can be a result of constantly being bombarded with electromagnetic frequencies. So identifying and eliminating the electrical disturbances is critical. There are a number of people in the population who are exquisitely sensitive to electrical disturbances, and these are people that are very hard to treat, and we have to use very special ways to mitigate the electrical disturbances that they're exposed to in their life. And finally, the eighth underlying cause is that of genetic disturbances. Just recently, we had the excitement of having our genetic makeup totally coded. And what we're now doing, because it's a very recent study, is the study of genetics and genomics, and that is figuring out what a person's genetic makeup is. Every one of us is very unique. We get genes from not only our mother and father, but we get genes from our past generations as well. And now we can determine what a person's genetic makeup is with a simple cheek swab, and a company which evaluates genes will be able to determine what your genetic weaknesses are. And what's important about determining genetic weaknesses is that when you find out what systems are affected and what's causing disease or illness, for example, if you have a genetic makeup which makes you more susceptible to cancer, then we can advise these people to do everything possible to make sure that genetic makeup that causes cancer or that will potentially result in cancer, we give all the recommendations to make sure that this cancer gene will not manifest itself. So, as you can see, these 8 underlying causes are very important to not only understand what's causing a person's illness, and as a sidelight, the traditional medical profession does not generally look at underlying causes, and so it's important to use diagnostic tools, assessment tools to find out what is causing the disease process, what underlying causes, and to be able to eliminate them. Compliance is very important, but once people find out that they are potentially more susceptible to cancer, or they've got an infection, or they've got a toxic buildup, then we can design a health plan around that. So when these underlying causes are eliminated, the body will heal itself. As I said before, the body is the only true healer. And once you eliminate the underlying causes of disease or illness, and you give the body the tools to heal, it will indeed heal if it's not too far into the disease process. We will be discussing the assessment techniques to be able to determine these underlying causes in future podcasts. But hopefully this gives you a really good idea of the whole mindset of how to get the body to heal even from severe illnesses so that they remain resolved and not continue to come back. It is very easy to mask the symptoms with a drug, but when you really truly want to get an illness resolved, this is the way to proceed. I want to thank you for listening to this podcast, and I hope you all remember to enjoy the journey. Take care.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Vital 100. Please check out our website, vital100wellness.com, for other ways to listen to our podcast, as well as additional health resources. If you have questions for Dr. Bob, or if you have feedback or recommendations for the podcast, please send an email to info@vital100wellness.com.